Black Mental Health Matters celebrates its 2-year show anniversary as we eradicate mental health stigma in our communities.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, whatever time you're listening to this. This is Rihanna from Black Mental Health Matters, and I'm joined by Karen. Would you like to introduce yourself, Karen? Oh, you're on mute, Karen. Do you want to unmute yourself? Karen, you're on mute, love.
Oh,
there we go. I can hear you now.
okay.
So second time lucky. Let's go.
I didn't realize I was actually muted, but it's okay.
It's
I
okay.
just
We
realized
move.
it
We
now.
move.
We move, yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Esosa. My full name is Omurgi Esosa Karen, but I just prefer to go by Karen Esosa. Everyone knows me by that name. I'm a mental health advocate, and I work as a host for Black Mental Health Matters, and I have been on the show roughly three months now. And I really am really enjoying it. I'm very passionate about the Black community and promoting mental health, wellness in our community. So I'm here today with Rihanna, and we're going to be hosting a couple of doctors on the show. And I leave it to you now.
Yes, yes, yes. So we are going to be discussing a very prevalent but impactful discussion today, one around mass shootings and the impact that trauma has on the Black community. And we've got a few community professionals with us today to discuss what this looks like, the sources of support that are available, and just a general discussion on the sociological, psychological, and cultural impacts that this can have on Black communities. So I'm going to bring on our first guest to introduce themselves, and we'll get into the discussion. So first off is Dr. Camille Jones. Dr. Camille, welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you so much for creating space to have such a necessary and needed conversation. I am Dr. Camille Adams Jones. I'm a native New Yorker, but I'm currently in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, which is where I host my practice. I'm a psychotherapist by trade. Mm-hmm. I do a great deal of work with from the aspect of cultural readiness, cultural preparedness, trauma residue, family structures, and really the development of the whole self, whether that be in the workplace or in relationships. And I'm so pleased that you guys allowed me to join you here today by trade. I am a behavior scientist. I represent for our social workers out there, as well as I'm a people person, and in people person, you have to understand the whole realm of being. And with that, I greet you all.
Wonderful. Thank you for that wholesome and wonderful introduction. Pleased to have you here. Our next guest that we'll be adding to our platform is Dr. Kevin Washington. Dr. Kevin, are you there? We can see you. We can't hear you.
Unmute. Okay, there we go.
Thank
you.
Here? We are here. We are here.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Welcome.
Again, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share on this very significant topic in our community, that is the mass shooting or the trauma within our community. I am Dr. Kevin Washington Mwata Kairi. You also see that as well. And I am the founder of Ubuntu Psychotherapy, which is a therapeutic process, a model for addressing the unique mental health needs and challenges of people of African descent. And also I serve currently as the chair of sociology psychology at Grambling State University, and the operator of what is called Nansapo. Here, are we here? Good. And so
Yep.
it's a pleasure to be here to be a part of the Black Mental Health Matters. I'm also serving as the president of the organization, so that's also an honor. So thank you so much for allowing us to have this conversation on a very significant, sensitive, and timely topic.
Yes, thank you very much again for a lovely, lovely, wholesome introduction. And our next guest, we're going to have a full house, everyone, trust me, but it's going to be well worth it. Next, we have Sonia Karte. Sonia, please welcome, welcome, welcome. Please introduce yourself to our Black mental health audience.
Thank you for having me here. I'm from Barbados. I'm a licensed spiritual practitioner with Centers for Spiritual Living, which is located in Colorado. I hold a degree in theology and I've completed 2 units of clinical pastoral education, which is just 2 units away from being a chaplain. And I've also completed 4 years of metaphysical studies. I'm very passionate about the whole healing for individuals. And I recognize that soul trauma is connected to our emotional, physical, psychological, and mental well-being, to our overall well-being in general. And I'm an advocate for wholeness, returning people to that place of wholeness. I'm complete.
Thank you. That lifted my soul just that little bit, but thank you for that lovely introduction as well.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you. And we also have Jasmine. Jasmine, welcome to Black Mental Health Matters platform. Please feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Jasmine McLaughlin. I am a licensed clinical social worker and private practice owner in Virginia. The name of my practice is Empowered to Thrive Counseling and Wellness, LLC. And I specialize in helping women to learn how to embrace their emotions and live authentically and also improve their relationships by learning to communicate assertively and set healthy boundaries. So I'm very passionate about that, and I've seen a lot of trauma over the past, couple of years in the clients that I serve. So I'm happy to be here to speak on this topic. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank everyone for being here. Really appreciate your time, your input on this discussion. And we will be joined by another guest that will be joining us a bit later to delve into this discussion as well. So I'm going to kind of kick off the discussion today with just a bit of a question to you all, because I know we're talking about mass shooting, and I think it will be helpful for the audience to understand exactly what mass shooting is, because it's very clear that there's different definitions and criteria. So I'm going to ask anyone that is not on mute, so that's you, Sonia. Would you please like to give us a bit of a definition of what mass shooting is to you, and the practice that you do as well?
Mass shooting for me is when someone willfully takes up a weapon and just go after innocent people. That is mass shooting. Sometimes you can have lots of fatalities and sometimes you don't. As it relates to my practice as a licensed practitioner, it just goes to show the level of trauma, not just from the shooter, because that impacts the victim's family, and persons like me who would see that on the news. So for me, being able to reach people at that level, I mean, even before they pull the trigger is important. Being able to understand what is going on at a spiritual level that you think that you need to destroy someone else's physical body.
Yeah.
And that's it for me, basically.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Would anyone else like to chip in with that description or definition? What does mass shooting mean to you in your practice? I'll throw this out to Dr. Kevin.
So when we talk about mass shootings, we're talking about the idea of some type of violence meted out against a larger population. And it could be, of course, one person doing this, or it could be several. And so when we talk about, I love what Sonia said about the idea of spirit. Ubuntu talks about the issue of spirit, spiritness, and spirit being. It's hard to talk about an African reality without talking about spirit. And so when we talk about trauma, trauma is something that disrupts spirit, and on the physical level, trauma disrupts something, some vital organ on the body, in the body, right? The skin or anything else, right? So this idea of trauma and mass shootings go hand in hand, because the mass shootings of a large population being disrupted psychologically, physically, emotionally, and we have to recognize that this has been an ongoing reality for people of African descent, not simply just shooting with guns, but in the context of violence in America, but actually procured from the continent. Again, the gun reigns supreme there, and the corruption that has occurred over generations, which is why I suggest that we can never have a post-traumatic stress disorder, because post means that somehow we are over the phenomenon. Post means beyond, why I call it persistent enslavement systemic trauma, a PEST. And so mass shootings, whether it is done by someone outside of the group or within the group, is disruptive, and it is a psychological, spiritual disruption that allows one to be able to want to impose their will upon others. And so mass shootings means that somebody is disrupted psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally to want to disrupt someone else. And we know the moniker that hurt people hurt people.
Phenomenal explanation. Thank you for that, Dr. Kevin. I just want to bring Dr. Dia to the stage because she's just joined us before we move on to our next question, which Karen will share with us. Welcome, Dr. Dia. Can you hear us? Can you see us?
Hello.
Hello, Dr. Dia. Can you hear us? Can you see us?
Yes, she can.
It's been dropping in and out a little bit. Okay. Well, whilst we're waiting for Dr. Dia to come back, Karen, would you like to share our next question for our guests, please?
Okay, all right. So our second question here on this panel will be, and this will be directed to Dr. Camille. Dr. Camille, what are the links between the community trauma experienced from mass shooting and everyday gun violence in the Black communities, and why do mass shootings receive more media and public show?
So there has always been this disparity of how Black violence versus Anglo-Saxon violence is presented and represented in the media. We have seen those that take to the streets to cause harm in mass shootings be described as mentally ill, as those represented in the African American community, when we may have Black on Black violence, described as barbaric, hoodlums, looters, things like that. Even in those kind of aspects, when we've had incidents where there's been looting and rioting, African Americans will be described as looters, disparaging the community, disharming the community. But there was a video of Anglo-Saxon, Caucasian, Asian individuals doing the same thing, and they were saying, look at how people have had to pillage to just survive the moment. So there's a sympathetic undertone and an allowance, and even sometimes an excuse that is created for others outside of our community. And I think when those kind of connotations and models are represented, especially in mainstream media, they create a residue on our folks. And I'm so pleased with Dr. Kahari's representation that post-traumatic syndrome makes it seem that this is something that we have overcome and now are revisiting. But there has never been this period of triumph and healing and developing, overcoming, and moving beyond these traumatic experiences. And what we have found is that our people as a whole have, and I hate to take on that strong Black female, strong African-American male persona, but we have created this armor, so to speak, this protective coat that has really shunned us from being able to get ourselves help and wellness when other avenues of our mental health are disrupted or become unbalanced, because we've been taught to persevere. We've been taught to go to prayer. We've been taught to go to push forward. You'll be okay. Just push through it. When in reality, our counterparts are taught break, respite, seek wellness, what do you need? Where we are just taught to journey through. And that's a mindset and myth we have to begin to dispel and move beyond, because if we look at the brighter picture of it, it's causing more harm than good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a good one. Thank you very much, Dr. Camille. And I'll just move the next question now to Rihanna.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Camille, for that explanation as well. And before I ask the next question, we are joined again by Dr. Dia. Can you hear us? Can you see us? Are you with us? No. Okay. Okay, we'll plow on and hopefully she'll be able to join in the next few questions. So, Dr. Kevin, you mentioned something before in your previous answer about the emotional, social, and psychological distress. So, this question's to you. Aside from the physical injuries that are encountered, could you explain to us what exactly are those factors that impact on the experience of someone that's either witnessed or endured a mass shooting? Would you be able
Right.
to explain that?
So within the context of post-traumatic stress disorder, they talk about someone who has experienced violence, or who has either seen it or heard of it, or is impacted someone close to them, and so that is what they mentioned in PTSD. What we talk about is again spirit injury, that is the violation of the humanity and spiritness of an individual. The violation of the right to exist. So the mass shootings are one of those things that takes place. But if you begin to go back and look at the shooting that took place in Buffalo, New York, and you see the maneuvering of the perpetrator, he stops when he comes to a European person or a white person, and he says, "Oh, sorry," which means he acknowledged the humanity of that person, but did not see others as having some level of agency that was worth recognizing. So then, seeing that, and that's what Sonia was mentioning earlier, as we see this, we're recognizing that there's this perpetual process of being marginalized or somehow being dehumanized. And for us, it is despiritualizing. And so we're looking at ways to respirit. That's one of the challenges that we have in the community, is that we spend a lot of time trying to respirit. That's what they call alcohol spirits. People are trying to get high based on feeling low. The idea of trying to re-spiritualize through something external. The reality is that we have to acknowledge that, as one person, Bobby Wright, the actual Bobby Wright talks about the racial pathological disorder, but also the person on the call says the same thing, that there's a pathological disorder within a population, utilizing their definition, which I think we have to be able to pay attention to, that something in this other population denies the right of others to be human. But for us, human is not simply a physical phenomenon within African context. For us to be human is to be spirit and to be acknowledged as us. That's why we fight around being disrespected. It is not the issue of you not seeing me. It's the issue that you're not seeing the essence of me. Among the Zulu, in closing, the Zulu would ask the question, "Sawubona, yebo sawubona," is the response. And sawubona means, one, I see you, but secondly, it says, do you have a presence? And you have a presence to the extent that you are connected to those that came before you and those that are tied to your essence. And so in the South, when I grew up, they say, "How your mama nim," zero copula, not how's your mother and the rest of them, but how your mama and them would suggest how are you connected to those around you. So for us, spirit being and spirit reality is about being connected, about being observed, or being embraced. The Zulu have a proverb that says, "Umuntu ngamuntu gabantu," which says a person is a person because they're other people. And so this idea of spiritness and disruption to such is not simply one about a physical one that pierces the skin, but it's one that pierces the essence of being. And that is the major repair that we have been working on for generations, is restoration of the essence of who we are as beings, spirit beings, learning to be human.
Wow. And that kind of pays so much homage to the interconnectedness that we have as humans. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. Okay. Fingers crossed we have our following guests that we'd like to reintroduce to the stage. So one of them is Dr. Shanae. We're going to bring her onto the stage. And bring her into the conversation. Dr. Shanae, how are you doing?
I'm well, and yourself?
Good, thank you. Welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. We've gone through a few little questions and we've had some very, very fruitful information shared. But before we go on, would you like to introduce yourself to the guests and our audience?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Shanae Gill. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia and Pennsylvania, and I'm a research fellow in family and community medicine, specifically exploring disparities in behavioral health from a public health perspective with populations and citizens of color, both in the United States and internationally.
Lovely. Thank you and welcome. Looking forward to getting into this discussion with you as well. And we also have Dr. Dia here. Dr. Dia, would you like to introduce yourself and welcome to the audience and our guests?
Hello, I'm Dr. Dia.
Oh, Shikon.
Dr. D is awesome. So I'm just waiting to hear her voice. So I guess
I know.
when we get this connection right, she will give us some great wisdom.
Absolutely. I believe
I'm
she's back.
here.
You back?
I'm here.
Wonderful.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you
Yeah.
and we can see you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm Dr. Dia Flicker. I am the Vice President here at Black Mental Health Matters. And I have my PhD in IO psychology, but I also am working on getting my terminal degree in marriage and therapy here. And so I just wanted to share with you all that these mass shootings have been something that has been near and dear to me because I've lost a couple of family members in the midst of what's going on. And I thought it was really important for me.
We'll wait a moment for Dr. Dia to come back. But yeah, I'm glad that Dr. Dia is joining because she'll be able to give a perspective that will give great added value.
So it's wonderful to be here and to be in the space with you all to talk about this.
You just cut out just ever so slightly, Dr. Dia. Would you be able to just go over the last tail end of what you was explaining?
Yes, I was saying that I've lost a family member due to the mass shootings, and recently had to attend a funeral regarding the impact it's having not just on my family but the Black community. And I'm happy to be in the presence of you all as a healing process to talk through things that are going on in terms of trauma in our community and the impact that it reaches families and the impact that it's had on my family. And so I'm honored to be here.
Okay. Whilst we're waiting for Dr. Dia to come back, Karen, would you like to share our next question with our guests, and Dr. Dia can jump in with that one as well when she's back and available?
Okay, sure, no problem. My next question will be in relation to what she was actually gonna say. Does anyone in this panel have any experience of being a mass shooting survivor? Know any survivors or have worked with any survivors before? Please help us understand from a first-hand perspective.
So I have, this is Camille. I am a critical incident and stress management debriefing expert. I do a great deal of work, what we call employee assistance programs. So I have a federal response that I do as well as a local and community response task force member that I work with. And as the CEO and founder of Clinician Fest, we do a great deal of work across the spectrum of mental health professionals, whether that be first responders, social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, nutritionists. We work in that avenue. And most recently, we have responded to 16 mass shootings. I know people feel like, wow, there hasn't even been 16 that's make the news. That's how common this has become. When the national media is reporting on one shooting, there are at least 4 to 6 additional ones taking place that never make it to national headlines, but they still break and disrupt communities. When we respond to these shootings, it is important to understand the importance of pause. Everyone responds and reacts differently. Trying to treat in the moment is sometimes more harmful, just allowing individuals to digest. If you were just shot at, just think about if you were in a car accident, how shaken you are in that first impact. You don't necessarily have words in that moment. It takes you a minute to just come together. And then you go, was I just in a car accident? Did somebody just hit us? Just things like that. So that same adjustment it takes from when you have those type of shock impacts, you need to ready yourself for that. The other avenue of this is I live in the DC area where there is high impact on a daily basis that quote unquote something can happen. There are threats a great deal. And this is someone coming from New York where we dealt with that as well after 9/11 and just feeling safe riding the subways. You start to think of scenarios in which you are most vulnerable, in which you can be quote unquote God. So you enter rooms and buildings, and the first thing you do is start looking for your exit. How do I get out of here if something happens? The introduction of fight, of flight, of run, hide, fight. We found that that was when you are in the midst of a mass shooting, that was our teachings about a decade ago, was to hide, run, and fight. Like hide if you can, run if you have that opportunity to get out, and then fight for your life. And what we have found is because of the trauma connected with these mass shootings and the casualties that have come with them, more individuals are going to a natural state of fighting first. You're not trying to hide. You're not trying to run. If you're running for your life. And if a fight ensues during that run, you are posturing to partake in that fight. The mindset of you're not going to take me today. I've got someone to get home to. I've got a reason to live. There's not this surrender mentality. Now, can you imagine being in constant confines of something may happen to me? A car backfires. Suddenly you think people are shooting. You see people running. The innate behavior is to start running too. You're looking back to see what you're running from, but you are hauling to get out. Our bodies are in this readiness mode that impacts our mental well-being. We no longer rest on a continuum. That is the pastime. The majority of our time is spent in a readiness mode, especially depending on where we are, like different places we go to. We are seeing that schools, elementary schools used to be a safe haven. You drop your children off from there. There are nurturers there to take care of them. Now we're finding that individuals in those type of jobs and positions are now considering themselves body shields, protecting the young, sacrificing themselves to make sure that those that they are there to educate are not harmed because someone has shown up at this place of academic excellence to take lives. It's just not a posture that we have been built to endure, but it is now what more are considering and calling upon as the norm. But we have to find a way to efface this because this is just not a pattern that the human body is set to be in for long periods of time. We want to live long. We want to have longevity. We want to have good life. We've done so many things from a holistic perspective of taking care of our bodies, but we've neglected these outside influences that are impacting our mental health and our stability. These forces that we don't necessarily have control over, but that are controlling us on our everyday situation. When you see people walking towards you, they're dressed apart, hoods, darkness, head down. Do you cross the street? Do you grip your pocketbook? Do you lock your doors when you first come in? Ladies, how do you carry your keys? Do you carry them with those keys out? Like we're in a fighting mode position. What is the conversation you have with your children? We used to talk stranger danger to our children. Don't talk to strangers. But now we're taught, if something happens to mommy, this is what I want you to do. This is the conversations have totally shifted. And we're in almost like a survival mode that is very catastrophic to many people's mental health endurance.
I know you have a question and statement, Rihanna. I wanted to just jump in on the back of that. Dr. Jones
Yeah,
made a
please
powerful
do.
point. And the powerful point is that there has been never a period of time in this country, in this space, people of African descent have not had to be in this readiness mode. And I think this is something that we don't recognize, and the wear and tear that has on the body, has on the neurological processing, the brain process. All these things are impacting births and birth weights and everything else. So we understand epigenesis, and we understand that the trauma of one generation can be birthed into the next. Diaz and Resl did research with mice where the mice were shocked, and these mice were shocked, and then they would have a whiff of cherry blossom and the orange blossom, and the orange blossom smell would be associated with the shock, so that you could have the whiff of the orange blossom, and the bodies would have a visceral response to that as if they were being shocked. These mice would have pups who were never shocked, but they would have the experience, have the whiff of the orange blossom, and their bodies would have a visceral response. These pups would grow up and they would have pups. Two generations down have or smell the orange blossom, they also would have the visceral response, though they've never been shocked. So we understand that epigenesis suggests to us that trauma can be passed down genetically. So there has never been a resolution period for people of African descent. So when we talk about when a black male goes out, remember, here's what to do. We're always in perpetual survival mode. Right. So we have to exist here at all times. So I like what Dr. Jones says about even now it's heightened. It has always been that way. My father, as I was driving through, learning to drive through certain parts of Louisiana into Texas, he would say that, remember, you cannot stop these restrooms in this location. You can try this one, which means he was always in survival mode. He was military, he was educator, but he was also being a black father, black man, saying there's some places that you cannot engage, right? And so we have to recognize that this is why I call it persistence. It seems systemic trauma. It is ongoing, and we have to be able to slow down the process of tearing down the body through trying to survive by regulating something, by suggesting that we don't have to keep trying to normalize insanity, right? We have to understand that we are whole people, and we keep judging ourselves against the lens of someone else's reality, which is what Dr. Woodson suggests about how we begin to perpetually see ourselves, or what Dr. Du Bois about double consciousness, but also Dr. Woodson says that when you control a man's thinking, don't worry about his actions. So we're always seeing ourselves as something other than human, and we begin to behave in an inhumane manner, which means that we begin to use nomenclature that suggests that we're not human. A nigga is not human, a bitch is not human, a hoe is not human. Those are subhuman realities. And so we have learned to adapt to being inhumane because we've been in an inhumane reality, but we begin to return ourselves back to being human. We can then reset our neurological processes, and then we can also begin to heal, because Reza said that you can actually teach mice how to respond properly to the orange blossom smell and the shock by giving them resolutions to such.
Wow. The knowledge that just got dropped on us all. Wow. Thank you, Dr. Kevin. Really appreciate that. Is there anyone else that would like to provide any insight to the question? If you like, I can reread it to give a bit of a reminder. But is there anyone else that would like to feed in?
I'll say something. So I know your original question was about whether we know someone who's been impacted by a mass shooting or worked with clients who have been victims and that kind of thing. So I would say no to that question, but I live in the Richmond area in Virginia, and so there has been an uptick in gun violence. People, especially in the Black community, people of all ages, and we've seen a lot of like high schoolers and just young people. And I attended the funeral of a childhood friend, close friend of the family, about a week ago, who was gunned down in early June. And one thing that I can say about that, which kind of, speaks to what Dr. Camille and Dr. Kevin were both saying about this living in survival mode, like the impact of that is people wondering, like, will I be next? Because it just seems like it's just occurring so frequently now. And, the body just staying in that that state of like fight or flight. So it's that constant trauma, that just repeated trauma has definitely had an impact. So I haven't seen it on a mass shooting level personally, but just gun violence, in the Black community.
Yeah, and I think it's very important and poignant to relate the two as well, because they both can have same and similar impacts on people, especially given the context of the persistent and continued trauma that's residual within your body. So if there are continual instances where this is happening, it's very important to know that it's not just from mass shootings, it is also from gun violence, local, within the communities as well. So thank you for that. Would anyone else like to provide an explanation, or would you be happy for me to share the next question? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So my question, this one will be to Sonia. What do you feel are the main factors that impact individual, family, and community level trauma and the health outcomes, the mental health outcomes that follow a mass shooting? So from an individual, family, and community level. You're on mute. Sonia, can you hear me? Are you having issues with your mic? Maybe someone else would like to answer the question until Sonia is able to sort out her audio. Dr. Shanae, we haven't heard from you. Would you like to come in on this question?
So I want to be certain that I'm understanding the question. So the question was, what are the factors at the individual, family, and
community level? Yeah.
Okay. And can you complete the rest of the question?
Sorry, the community level that follow, the mental health outcomes that follow a mass shooting.
I think for me, I guess I would start at the individual. And as a counselor, one of the theories that I gravitate towards, even though it's more so supported and recognized in social work, is understanding an ecological systems theory and understanding the individual as being the core and crux of being significantly affected by other systems beyond that individual, and the interrelated effect, I would suppose, of mass shootings, where the individual is influencing the system is simultaneously influencing the individual. And one of the things that I think is valuable, and this is also to Ms. McLaughlin's point, is about the individual. There's an internalization that occurs when individuals are exposed to repeated and recurring trauma, especially mass shootings, for example. And so when you have repeated exposure to traumatic events that are gradual, it contributes to that complex trauma oftentimes that individuals experience. And I would say, unfortunately, that affects marginalized persons more so than others, for a series of other reasons that I think are very clear and evident: racism, discrimination, and oppression at each level of the system. And so through that internalization process, I think that unfortunately, negative attitudes and beliefs that individuals start to internalize, where they may misattribute some of the outcomes of those experiences. They may misattribute the reason or the rationale for those things having occurred. And in particular, for people who are minorities, they may again experience or are more likely to experience adverse negative outcomes, specifically if it's something that has occurred or it's been a crime against a community of color. And so one of the outcomes of that, and I think for me personally, I think we talk oftentimes about depression and anxiety, which are very obvious, but we need to go a little bit further about the impact that that has on one's identity, their sense of belonging, the sense of safety, the ability to just be and exist, especially as a person of color or other marginalized groups. And so I think, unfortunately, what happens is that when it challenges one's identity, their schema, their understanding of the world and the environment, that's when we start to see the adverse and negative mental health outcomes and emotional outcomes on people. But another part of that also, as we talk about families and communities, it changes the behavior and the relationship dynamics. It affects our interactions. It affects how we perceive other individuals in our environment. We, again, through the process of kind of misattribution, might start to see the world as inherently unsafe, an
Yep.
overall negative perspective and philosophy or worldview, if you will, about other persons within our natural environment and within our world. So it significantly affects relationships and our ability to establish trust and safety in those relationships. I think it is counterproductive to cohesiveness, which has really been the core of our communities in particular, and is a part of the reason why we continue to suffer on many levels, because we've gotten away from those traditional and inherent values that we once have. And again, it's because the more of the trauma that you experience, the more likely that you are to perceive others as being unsafe, and quite frankly yourself. This all begins with that internalization process through repeated and gradual exposure. And it really is the mind's way of trying to keep you safe. However, the brain has immense difficulty separating reality versus what is left to the imagination. And I think that that's something that is a challenge that we are experiencing across the nation. Really, this internalization process and having to unlearn and relearn so that we can adjust our schema to be more productive in allowing us to thrive and overcome our trauma rather than succumbing to it. And so those are kind of my thoughts about how I see each levels of those systems playing out, and some of the effects beyond just mental health of the individual, but more so the structure of the relationship, the families, and the communities. And it has really been counterproductive for most persons, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And the breakdown of the ecological systems really does help put it into perspective on the different levels of impact as well, particularly for that question. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Shani. Sonia, are you with us? Would you like to give input to that question?
Yes, I would like to give input coming from the Caribbean, because to date, we have not experienced mass shootings. Here in Barbados, shootings can happen very sporadically, and it may be just one person. The most I think has ever been to is maybe two people, just a drive-by gang shooting, black on black. But even in that, you still have a fear. There is still the fear and the anger. I mean, I watch on CNN these situations unfolding across the USA and in other places where blacks are being treated unfairly, or being killed just because of their skin color. And what that does for me as someone in the Caribbean is create fear, the fear of traveling to the USA. What if I go there and I encounter that kind of situation? And this is something that I felt from in the 80s, to the point where people say, why don't you migrate to the USA? And I'm like, no, Barbados is safe. Places like Dominica safe. For the most part, I find that it is safety that we think of in terms of our mental well-being. Most people just want to feel safe. They want to be able to go out of their homes and know that they will come back. You want to know that your children will leave home and they will come back. So for me, I think that depression and fear and anger are states of mental unwellness that one can encounter after traumatic experiences such as mass shootings, even for us in the Caribbean region, because we see this, and we see this as our Black brothers and sisters being slaughtered for no good reason. So it does impact us here as well. It reminds us of colonialization and the impact that colonialization has had on us as a people on the whole.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree. Karen, would you like to share the next question, or if anyone else would like to provide input on that, we are welcoming additional comments.
I'll go. I was just going to speak to the piece about safety that both Sonia and Dr. Shanae spoke about. I think that the feeling of like not being safe outside, but also not being safe inside our bodies is huge. And as a therapist, I think that really can make it difficult to do some of the, emotional healing work when it comes to healing from trauma. So there's a lot of yeah, a lot of work that I do is just learning how to be safe in your own body, and then that translating to feeling safe outside, even though there are so many external factors that influence that safety.
That's an important point, and I believe it's also recognizing what you are able to control, your spheres of control, what you are able to control and what you're not able to control as well, and creating a sense of psychological and physical safety around that. So thank you very much, Jasmine, for that.
Brianna, I did want to add in something.
Please do.
It was very powerful what was articulated, right? Dr. Gill mentioned this idea of communal context of being. It's imperative to understand that how there's been a breakdown in the Black community, people of African descent, and also in the Caribbean, in Barbados. Let me pause and say this, right? There is also another gun situation in Barbados that's very distinct from other places. I've had a chance to spend a lot of time in Barbados, so I know about them and gun laws and regulations, which may decrease the amount of gun violence that will actually occur in that space. But it's critical to know that part of the identity of a population, the idea of cultural trauma, the idea that this trauma is owned by an entire group, is one of the things that cause people of African descent to bind together. It was the illusion that somehow there was an inclusion in a system that began to split a bifurcated population that occurred somewhere in the 70s and 80s, and it became the normative thing to be able to in a better place. This post-civil rights era, the identity formation of people of African descent was largely influenced by this perpetual trauma. So what was mentioned about earlier about the internalization process is that we were attacked and assaulted because of our skin, right, in this country. And we were very clear about that. We were lynched and castrated because of our skin color and how we function, our body structure. So we have perpetual narratives that talk about what distinguishes us from Europeans. And so when we talk about the earlier indices of intelligence in this country, it was about lip size, it was about the coiliness of hair, it was about the skin, about the cranium size, and how many pebbles or pellets could fit into the skull. So this has been an ongoing process. Even the sterilization laws that were utilized using the earlier IQ test developed by Lewis Terman and others was really a way to annihilate a population. If we talk about IQ testing and sterilization laws and human betterment movement in California, for example, it was suggested that if you didn't score a certain score on a test, then you would deem to be. Let's go first group IQ test, which was the Alpha Army Beta test, which was determine who should be infantry and who should be officers. And so typically they had the Army Beta test for the illiterates. And so as a result, many times people who were darker, people of African descent, would score lower, and they were deemed to be officers, which means by a default, you have another system of genocide because you have a test that is already biased. And then you put these people on the front line, which means that you're wiping out a population. So we talk about mass shootings. It was legalized mass incarceration, mass annihilation of a population through even psychology and testing, which was based on our skin, right? So this idea of feeling comfortable in our skin has never been a situation where we've actually felt it. That's why we have good hair and bad hair. That's why we engage in skin bleaching around the entire globe, right? Because there's something that we're not feeling comfortable with and trying to escape. So we have to understand that we're trying to escape the trauma that occurs to us from a population. And that's also another form of mass shootings. I want to say that even on this campus of Grambling State University, as students came back to school last fall, there was a person who was suffering from this idea of, I would say, African inferiority, who actually took several people engaged in shooting at the homecoming event openly on this campus. So I love what was mentioned earlier by Dr. Jones, said that many times these things never get talked about. This did not make national news, but it was something that occurred on Grambling State University's campus, HBCU. It occurred at Jackson State University. There was this mass shooting of a population based on an unresolved element of the dehumanization of a population. So we've identified ourselves with not being human. So we have to recognize that this lack of not being comfortable in our skin is a perpetual process of European thought and ideology, which becomes something that we own. And Dr. Wade Nobles reminds us that power is the ability to define reality. and to have others to respond to your definition as if it were their own, right? And so we have responded to their definition as if it were our own definition, that we believe ourselves to be inferior, and as a result, we live as such. And Nobles uses this story very eloquently by saying that a sheepdog is made by taken away from its biological mother when it is born. It suckles at the breast of a sheep, so it believes that it is a sheep. And what it does is that it will use all of its dog instincts to protect the safety and safety of the sheep. That if you put its own biological opinion with it, it will attack and kill her. But the worst part about it is that if you put an image, a mirror in front of that dog, it will attack its own image because it believes its image is its enemy. So my point is then that we have been conditioned to see ourselves as our own enemy. And so we have to deal with generations of this particular process of, I love it, about internalization of something that is wrong with us. That's why we have hair. Something is wrong with us. Your hair can't be good or bad. It is what it is, right? Bad hair would jump off your head and start fighting you, right? That's bad hair. But the reality is that we have learned to internalize that something about us is incorrect. And that's a perpetual state of trauma. To me, that is mass shooting of the psychological nature. That is menticide that we have to begin to address as well. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Kevin. Thank you very much for that. So that will lead me to my next question. And this is directed at Dr. Jasmine. What is community healing and how can this support Black communities following a mass shooting?
So I would define community healing as, coming together as a collective for the purpose of like reconnecting and uniting and getting back to like that spiritual nature. I know we've talked a lot about like spirituality and the importance of that. So I really think that community healing can happen when we really focus on that spiritual element, whatever that may look like. And I think that can happen in a number of ways. I went to an event for Juneteenth last Sunday, and there was live music, there was dancing, and it was mostly Black people in attendance. And I think that can be a form of community healing, like embracing joy, like embracing Black joy in the midst of the trauma and all the things that are recurrent, but still reclaiming that space for ourselves. I think that's really important, and that can be a key way that community healing can take place. Is just reclaiming our bodies as our own, reclaiming joy for ourselves, because there are so many factors that are trying to take that away. So I think that's huge.
Thank you very much for that, Doctor. I know it's not been easy, especially during the COVID now with the whole COVID restrictions last year and the year before. A lot of people didn't go out to do the cultural activities like dancing, music festivals and things like that. So it's been a little bit difficult. So I'm not surprised with the whole like mental health issues like coming up right now. So does anyone have anything to add to this? What is community healing? How can Black people assess that? How can we support the Black community with this?
When we think about healing community, we cannot have a selfish mindset or self-serving agenda. It has to be a unified, and I know that's a struggle sometimes per the others, but Black people do unify. Black people do come together. Black people do have community. It may not look the way others want it to look, but it is 100% present. But it takes the works and good deeds of us all. There's an intentional effort that is needed to healing. And with that comes the exposure of what harmed us to begin with. And whether those factors are external or internal, it is the pulling back the curtains and unveiling of all those sources of harm and a fixture of them. What are we doing to do better? Are we ready to come out of this mindset of, Big Mama always taught us what happens in this house we don't talk about outside? Are we ready to have outside conversations about what's happening in home? And when I'm speaking that, I'm speaking in terms of community. Healing starts with exposure. We expose this wound, we work on it, we treat it. If something happens to it where the scab gets pulled, it starts to fester again, we go back, we reapply treatment. And we work on it until it's healed. And it's a process. And it's a process that requires, again, intentional efforts. And then there's this desire of better. Better is subjective of what better looks like. Because people are like, I can't wait to turns back to the normal times. Does normalcy work for every aspect of our community? What is normal? What is normal? What is that truly the baseline we want to operate and work from? For some, normal was the pits of the belly's beast, and we need to move beyond that. For others, normal was working for them, but there's been this evolution. I've been so proud of this upcoming generation. They have this mindset of not today, and it's glorious. There's this no longer this acceptance of these generational trends that have been passed down. It is, yes, I can be a part of the great resignation. Yes, I know how to make soap. So I'm going to make soap and I'm going to use that as a means of a catalyst to my financial stability and generational wealth building. I'm a doer. I'm a builder. Healing takes builders. We need individuals who are not just comfortable waiting for a seat at the table, but have gotten themselves a stool, some wood, nails, and a hammer, and are building their own. Our desire to belong has to evolve into our desire to sustain, build, and endure. And that comes with healing. And it also comes with erasing some of these tones of acceptance and conformity that have been ingrained in us on a continuous basis. It's psychologically ingrained in us to do this. For years, you would never catch my hair like this on public meetings. I worked in a heavy corporate environment. I still do, but I show up like this. I wear my colors. You know, I will be in a natural state. I will do what's necessary. And I have a daughter. She is 9, and she's like, Mommy, I want to wear my hair like this. Do it, baby. Do it. We need to teach our sons. We need to embrace our sons. They are so cute and cuddly. How do they evolve to the world feeling like now they're a threat, they're a danger, they are someone we should fear? We've got some work to do. This is called coming to the table to do the needed when necessary. And as a community, we can, but we can't heal just individual pieces. We have to be comfortable with coming together as a collective and doing this jointly. We can't just take care of our household. We got to take care of the block. And from the block will take care of the neighborhood. From the neighborhood will take care of the community, and it will fester. And we can do this with joined hands. I thank you guys so much for having this platform today, for having me today. I don't want to, I know I thought we were closing, but I went a little bit over, but thank you guys so much for allowing my voice and my quote unquote 2 cents to bear these airwaves.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Dr. Camille. No, we're going to close in a little soon, but we still have 2 or more questions to go, and we'll just wrap up. So that's a very interesting one. Yeah, we do need to come together as a community. It's just that sometimes some people can be a bit withdrawn, like they don't want to go outside there and spread like whatever personal issues they could be going through, to the community. I don't know, like due to their own personal trauma, but in the Black community, people talk and, people discuss about like others. So I don't know, could you think that could also be a factor to look into?
Is that directed at me or is that to the audience?
That's Dr. Jones.
To anyone. Oh. To anyone, actually. Yeah.
I welcome anybody's other comments. I know I had spoken, but I say I at the end of the day, if we block ourselves with can't or it won't work, that's a posture we're taking from the beginning. A no is a no beats a let's give it a shot any day. If you position and condition yourself that nothing will get better, we can't come together, there'll always be this pocket of people that won't come with us. You got to remember Harriet. We tell her story, we speak of it, how those she brought, but there were hundreds, if not thousands, that she could have saved. But the mindset kept their feet steady, kept their feet cemented in the South. There will be folks that we may have to leave behind, but the goal is that doesn't stop the train from moving. That does not limit the efforts of the intent of the model. We push forward. We push forward with the hopes that they join forces with us. And if not, we still don't damage those that know better is upon us.
Okay, and I think Dr. Kevin, you had something to add.
I mean, that example of Harry Tubman is so powerful because the question that Dr. Jones is addressing is that she was asked, how many people did you save? And she said, I could have saved a lot more if they only known that they were slaves, right? And she always carried a gun. People assumed that she carried a gun to eradicate someone that was trying to encroach upon them. She said she carried a gun in case someone chose to turn to go back, because she knew that if you were weak enough to turn and go back, you would tell somebody about the Underground Railroad. So you have to be sacrificed. So she told them before the journey even started that if you choose to go back, this is going to be yours, right? So these are critical statements about the idea of group communal healing that was mentioned earlier. Is that the idea of Ubuntu? When I talk about Ubuntu psychotherapy, talks about the issue of being connected. The word UBU, Zulu word meaning construct, meaning beingness. Into you means unifying life force. And so when we talk about in Ubuntu therapy, is that the idea of feeling a sense of connectedness that gives you agency in the world. So we want to be clear about the communal healing. I love the idea of coming together in the context of a Juneteenth celebration. I want to recognize the idea when Black people come together in the United States, they will do the electric slide. They will move in 7 different directions. Of the Harlem Shuffle, they will move in 7 directions. According to the Bantu Congo, we move in 7 directions. We move left, right, upward, downwards, backwards, forwards. Those are 7 distinct directions that we move in, and that's the idea of being connected. That's a healing moment. Right. So we have to recognize that all of these are communal healing moments that we have to observe and recognize as those things. But we have to recognize clearly the mindset. How do we adjust the mindset so that we begin to see ourselves not as inferior? How do we begin to challenge the nomenclature that we utilized as terms of endearment, which actually have come from the oppressor? How do we begin to challenge those things to be able to understand who we are, so we don't have people like Harry Tubman saying that we could have freed a lot more if you had only known that you were not a nigger, right? If we understand that there's an idea of a person who is non-human, nigga being the derogatory form of the word nigger, coming from a derogatory form of the word negro, which comes from a word necro, or negra meaning black in Spanish, necro meaning death in Portuguese. So in reality, this idea about death is a part of that particular that term. However, negra is also a najir means black substance, which means of God force. If we return people back to that God force, that godliness, not the inferior state, then when we come together, the healing is enhanced in the group, because we know that I only can heal to the extent that everybody around me is healed. The body does the same thing. It gets ill by one cell at a time, and one cell informs other cell, and the immune system begins to tear down. But also one cell says, you know what, I'm not going to be in this state, and then the body begins to repair one cell at a time. I think what Dr. Jones mentioned is very powerful. The healing must take place one cell at a time, but the group, and so the entire body. And so I'm not getting healed for myself. I'm getting healed so that we all can be better, right? And that's the beauty of who we are. And even in the word individual, it actually has in, which means not, divi, divide, dual, duality, which means a duality that can never be split, which means that we're always tied and connected to something else other than ourselves. So the communal healing comes in the context of recognizing that I only have agency in existence because I'm tied to someone else. Get better, I'm also responsible and accountable for helping others get better, as we all get better together.
Amazing. Yeah, feel
Can I
free to
just
jump
jump
in,
in?
Sonia. Thank you. Please do.
That I'm very glad that Kevin went there, because as he was speaking, it brought me back to my own practice, which is spiritual healing, which is bringing people back to their true identity, that you're one with God and God is all there is. So even in the midst of seeming negative behavior patterns, we're still called to bring that unconditional love to the situation. It is not for the perpetrators of crime, but it is for ourselves. Bring that self-love back to us, because we can only heal us. We can't go out there and heal other people. As a spiritual practitioner, part of my job is to help people find their own wholeness, return you to wholeness, bring you back to your true identity. And that true identity is that we're all divine. We're all made of that fabric that God is made of. And therefore, we have to be mindful of the self-talk that we give ourselves. We also have to be mindful of the talk that we get from external people. I think for too long, we as a people have allowed other people to tell us who we are, what we can achieve and cannot achieve, rather than continually go to the source that says, I am. And in that I am is everything that we want to be. If you say I'm strong, I am strong. But if we continue to see ourselves as victims, if we continue to see ourselves as those people who are not welcome on this planet, we will get more and more of that coming at us. And with that, I'm complete.
Powerful, powerful. Thank you. The power of I am and words of affirmation and confirmation. Definitely. Thank you very much. So, everyone's kind of explained our next question. It was going to be about self-care, burnout, and alleviating emotional distress, but it's kind of already been answered. So I will move on to our final few questions. So this one's going to be to you, Jasmine. What are some government interventions to help the Black community in recovering from trauma-related issues such as gun violence, police brutality, and psychological distress?
Well, I think that I think one government intervention can just be more resources. I mean, I think when we think about the Black community, like one thing that's really lacking is resources, whether that's monetary, information. I mean, we've just been shut out from access to so many things over the past, several centuries. So I think resources, funding more mental health initiatives, more Black mental health professionals. I think there's a need for that, because I get a lot of calls from people who say, yeah, I'm looking for a Black therapist, and I came across your profile because I was looking for a Black therapist. So I think there really is a desire to connect with people who look like us, because we for so long, like just with discrimination and systemic racism, there's not as much of a connection to people who don't look like us, and they don't really understand what we go through on a systemic level. So I think resources is really where it starts. I mean, I think there also needs to just be recognition of what we are experiencing and validation of that. And there really is no validation. I mean, we've been gaslighted for so long, gaslit for so long. So unless there's acknowledgement of our stories and what we're going through, I don't think we'll get the resources. So it starts with validation. I think there needs to be acknowledgement that, hey, I hear you, I see you, some sort of reparations, all of that is needed. And I don't know if that's going to happen, honestly. But we can pour into ourselves too, and we can come together as a collective too. So that's something that is within our power, and it's not really leaving it up to the government to say, hey, like, we see what we've done to you for so long, so here's what we're giving you now. I'm not sure that we'll get that. So I think in some ways, like, we have to kind of take back control so that we can move forward and heal.
Yep, I agree. Thank you very much, Jasmine. Dr. Camille, would you like to provide some insight to this question as well, please? You're on mute, Dr. Camille.
I said, I don't know. I feel like she nailed it. What do you guys like? What more do you add on there? I will ask one more thing. What do you feel are the limits from us getting there?
That's a very good follow-on question. Thank you.
That's for
Would
me, I
anyone?
guess,
Yeah, I
or
was going back to you,
anyone.
Jasmine. Go back to you, Jasmine.
Okay. What do like the limits of us taking back that power?
Yeah.
The limits. I mean, I think I think as a community, like we're just like how trauma can make us feel like fractured and kind of disconnected from ourselves. I think that what trauma has done to the community is that we don't feel connected to ourselves or each other. So I think one of the limitations is that there needs to be, more healing on an individual and collective level in order for us to realize the need to come together. Because I think a lot of us are kind of blind to that, and we don't really understand how deep this issue goes.
I agree. And I think
Yeah.
another barrier comes from access,
Mhm.
awareness,
Yeah.
education. Those limitations, those disparities that we don't necessarily take into place because we live in this community, so we have full awareness of it. We've researched it to death. This is what we do. But there's a pocket of our community that doesn't have this same knowledge, this same access or awareness. If this pandemic exposed anything, it was that. The things that we spoke that we could never do. We could never do therapy online. How will we maintain confidentiality over the internet? We could never work from home. Oh my goodness, the patients need to see, touch, and smell us. We bought all these cardigans. What are we going to do if we never get to showcase them? And we've proven that we can't. We've proven that rural America can have the same access to therapeutic care and intervention as someone in Houston, in Dallas, in Atlanta, in New York, in DC, in LA, right? We've proven that. But now we're trying to take it away. We've proven that I don't need to live in your state to be to give you care. We've proven that. There was this whole suspension of the state guideline mandates on who you could see and who you could not see. Now they're trying to pull that away. So there's this other advocacy of, if it's working, let's not fix it. We've proven that it can work. So what are our efforts to keep it going? And I think it'll knock out some of those barriers that you spoke of, Jasmine, because it's needed. And you have to also take into consideration when rules, when laws, when policies are put in place, what is that policy saying? And who is it really talking to? Like, is it talking to us? Is it limiting us? Like the whole, you can't give out water in line when you're waiting to vote. Was that to discourage us and our elderly folks, the largest turnout population around voting right now? Was that to discourage us? Like, do we kill grandma just so she can vote? Things like that. You have to be paying attention. And these people don't realize how much mental health is weaponized. People don't realize how much it's weaponized just in everyday systematic policies being pushed. I know everybody is in an uproar of what's happening right now with Roe v. Wade. But anybody heard about them coming for Brown versus the Board of Education? While we're worrying about what's happening on the right, don't forget to look at the left. Like I tell people all the time, magic is real. So you have to be paying full attention across all boards because barriers come in all shapes and forms. And I also need you guys to be mindful that barriers will look like us. Barriers will talk like us. You ever heard that all skin folk and kin folk kind of thing? Back to Dr. Harriet had a gun for a reason. I'm not wanting to promote that, but our wellness will come from really washing off all of the historic residue that has kept us still, being no longer open to accepting these barriers of access, fairness, balance, equality, and openness to resources, and being the creator and curator of the things that we need, and being willing to be consumers of the things that we need and taking advantage of that. Often like, I don't want to buy Black because of their customer service, because of this and things like that. But I'm telling everybody, we are going to be in a state of where we are going to have to buy at home. We are going to have to be consumers of our own. And that economic power realization will carry us so far. Will carry us so many communities profit off of our economic ignorance. And the day we take that back is when true power avails.
Thank you. Some powerful, powerful information. And I think it's very true that when it comes to the centralized voices around these initiatives and policies that are being created, the ones that are most disadvantaged need to be central to how we can be alleviated from these struggles as well. So, Dr. Kevin, is there anything you'd like to add in respect to that question?
This is a powerful panel, man. I'm just excited. There is so many ideas. Thank you so much, McLaughlin and Dr. Jones and Dr. Gill. They'll be just heavy. And Sonia, there's a lot happening here. Dr. Carter G. Woodson says that if the Negro in the ghetto looked to the hand that put him in the ghetto to get out of the ghetto, he'll never get out of the ghetto. Very simply said that if the streetwalker looked to the pimp to get her off the street, she never get off the street. Or if the drug addict looks to the drug dealer to take him to rehab, he never get to rehab. Whereas we have to be able to hold people accountable for certain actions that have taken place to remedy our situation. We cannot look to them to resolve the issue. Some suggest that there's a difference between who's to blame and who's responsible. And in large part, we know that the idea of global white supremacist ideology is to blame, and we have to deal with who's responsible for making a shift, a change here. And we do spend a lot of money, income, on things that really don't matter, trying to feel good in the moment, right? We spend a lot of money, exorbitant money on hair, weaves, and we spend a lot of money on nails. We spend a lot of money on eyelashes and makeup and so forth. We spend a lot of money on things that make us feel good, men and firearm and so forth and so on, trying to equalize something. But the real issue, the real challenge is coming from within. Sonia said something very powerful about the issue of the God force. In ancient Kemet, they would say all the time, Anuk Asar, which says, I am divine. We recognize that we were already divinely inspired, that we were created to be, and to become more powerful, then we understand what the word human being is. I'm being all that was created to be and becoming more like that which created me, right? So that would be a major shift that we would have to encounter. And I just love the of understanding that the is on us to make a shift, make a change. The I am is critical because we recognize, again, I am factor, that whatever comes behind that is what becomes, right? So I am tired, then thus I am in a beingness of tiredness. But if I'm feeling tired, it's a different phenomenon altogether. If I am divine, then when I begin to see things, I can see things differently. That's what was so powerful about Dr.
Just losing you a little bit there, Dr. Kevin. I think, Dr. Kevin, we've lost your audio in the midst of such a powerful statement as well.
So thank you for the pause and filibustering for me. The idea of I am in the transformative power in the midst of COVID. We did we traverse many things I have in my space right now is because of understanding what I could do in COVID. So not only did we learn it in the practice, but we learned it within ourselves. COVID allowed us to be pulled back and recognize what was really important. COVID allowed us to be able to figure out how to be together. Karen, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You've just jumped back in. The audio keeps chopping in and out, unfortunately, as you're getting into the depth of what you're saying. But I really would like you to finish, in all honesty, because it sounds like you were going somewhere deep with it.
I was saying that we learned how to be together. Many times people were having some problems in their marriages, and they were saying that it's tough to be in this space together because we do together all the time, right? Even when we go out to eat, we're doing something together. But COVID made us stop and figure out how to be together,
Yes.
right? How to be with someone else, how to even be with ourselves, because we're so busy doing something that we never have a chance to be. And what I think is so powerful is that when we recognize that there's so much to us than simply reactionary individuals, that we are responsive individuals, that we are responsive beings. That means that we are responding to what's around us, but we're responsible as well, which means we have agency to do things differently. We've been given two gifts on this given day. That is, we've been given the gift of time, the thing that we say we don't have enough of, and the ability to use it wisely, right? And we often squander both gifts by saying what Dr. Jones was saying about putting I can't, right? I don't, right? The spirit of lack will hold you back, right? So the idea that we have internalized our own inferiority in a system of racism and oppression, that we believe ourselves to be something less than what we truly have been created to be. And so I am appreciative of the idea of recognizing this notion of mass shootings and the trauma caused by such. To recognize that shooting can occur via a gun, but shooting can also occur via ideas, concepts, constructs, and conversations that we have to be able to challenge. It was said powerfully that we have to challenge our internal conversation and to challenge what do we say about ourselves and what do we learn about ourselves? How do we treat ourselves? How do we treat one another? Powerful piece. So don't think that mass shooting is simply a traumatic event that occurs via a gun. That everybody on this call is a victim of some words that somebody's told them about themselves that still has a scar that some people have never healed from, right? That's also a victim of mass shootings. And so we've been had a mass shooting of our own Black identity, that we're different, that we're distinct. So in Barbados, we're not the same as African over in Jamaica, not the same as one in African in America, right? We in the UK, you're very distinct from everyone, right? And we're not realizing that the reason why we're dispersed in those spaces is because somebody else desired to utilize our gifts and talents for their own benefit. If they can recognize our gifts and talents for their benefit, how much further can we go recognize our own gifts and talents in the universe? And that's why I say that we must recognize that we are a seed of a seed of a seed of a seed of the seed. And that begins to allow us to be able to survive and rise above any mass shootings. And we can demand for the government to stand up and do something for us. We demand for ourselves to get up and do something for ourselves. I love taking people to the Gambia just recently. That was a healing moment as well, to reconnect. That's a re-Africanization process. In the curriculum, I infuse African self-knowledge within the curriculum. I infuse that in everything that I do. The idea of self-love does not have to take a holiday. It's always on, right? In the clothes we wear, Dr. Jones talked about the natural hair. Think about it. European women go out with natural hair every single day. But then for us, it becomes a major ordeal. I'm natural. What does that mean? Why is natural seen as abnormal, but unnatural is normalized, right? So think about how we live upside down. So we can challenge those things of healing within ourselves, one cell at a time. And as that happens, as Dr. Jones says, her children are freed, and they free up other people.
And this is why we needed to have the ending of what you said, Dr. Kevin. Powerful, powerful, powerful. And to kind of go off the back of the divisiveness that you were just referring to, we want to circle back to something that Dr. Camille said with Karen offering our last question.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to add to what Dr. Kevin was saying. He talked about the natural hair. So like that also comes in, like, yeah, white women have their natural hair, but we as Blacks, we don't really. Some of us do, some of us don't. But I think the problem's coming from the fact that we don't actually have the products that can maintain our natural hair coming from us. Like, do you get what I mean? Like, I can leave my natural hair out because I know that I'm going to lose it all. Like, the weather will probably not be, the weather here in America, back when I was in Africa, I could leave my hair out because the weather would not chop my hair or something. But when I'm here, I realize that the weather just doesn't go along with my hair. And if I leave my natural hair out, and there's no product, like we don't really have the product that can help, I can put on my hair and leave it out and without my hair getting chopped off. So, maybe we don't have people producing that kind of product that are suitable for our own hair texture. That could also be a factor to it too. So I don't know. Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add to the show today? Because I don't really have any other questions. Those are the only questions I have. Anybody want to do the closing for this show?
I don't know that this
was
is the closing, but whenever I hear the term gun violence, it separates the human who pulls the trigger from it. It almost seems as though the gun itself has life, when the reality is that there is a being behind that trigger who pulls the trigger. There's a violent person who's pulling that trigger, who's using that gun as a weapon. Because you can leave a gun in a case and it wouldn't do any harm. It will just be there in a case. But the minute that someone has the intention to go out and use it for violence, especially in the US, you hear the term gun violence. But I would rather that the term be used differently and say, you know what? A violent person with a gun did mass shooting at X place. Because a gun on its own cannot cause injury. It needs that human element.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that final piece. And I would like to round off this show and thank all of our show guests for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight and input. Such a fruitful and nourishing discussion and very, very informative as well. So just want to thank you, Dr. Kevin, Sonia, Jasmine, Dr. Camille, also Dr. Dia and Dr. Shani for everyone's input. And obviously to my lovely, lovely co-host, Karen, as well, for co-hosting with me today. So thank you, and we appreciate you. Make sure you are looking after yourselves, your communities, looking after your mental health at the very most. Look after your spiritual health as well. So thank you everyone for listening. We're going to end the show now. Black Mental Health Matters. My name is Rihanna. I'm your show host today. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rihanna, and thank you, Karen.
Thank you. This was awesome.
This was amazing.
Thank you both. Thank everyone. Awesome. I learned a lot today.
Me too.
Me too.
Me too.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.